My daughter-in-law gave my bedroom to her mother, packed away my husband's photographs, and then my own son ordered me to sleep outside on a folding cot in the backyard. I thought I had lost my place in my own home, but what I discovered afterward made me realize this was never just about a bedroom. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Before I tell you what happened to me, I want to know something. Where are you watching from right now? Type your city in the comments down below. I read every single one of them myself, and it truly means the world to me. And if you believe grandmothers deserve respect in their own homes, if you believe what happened to me should never happen to anyone, then please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Now let me tell you my story, exactly as it happened, just a few short weeks ago, from beginning to end. My name is Margaret Holloway. I am 74 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I lived in the same house I have lived in for the last 31 years. My husband Harold and I bought that house together back when we were young and broke and full of dreams. We raised our son Gregory in that house. We painted the fence together every summer. We buried our old dog Buster under the maple tree in the backyard. Harold passed away 6 years ago, and after that, I kept the house exactly the way he liked it, because it was the only piece of him I had left. When Gregory got married to Melissa 4 years ago, I was so happy. I thought finally my son has found someone to build a life with. I welcomed her with open arms. I gave her my late mother's pearl necklace on her wedding day. I told her, from today, you are my daughter too. And when their finances got tight 2 years ago, when Gregory lost his job at the plant and Melissa was between jobs, I did what any mother would do. I told them to move in with me. Rent-free, no conditions. I said, this house has room enough for all of us, and family takes care of family. For the first year, things were fine. Not perfect, but fine. Melissa was polite to my face, though I noticed small things. The way she would rearrange my kitchen cabinets without asking. The way she would talk over me at the dinner table like I wasn't even there. The way she referred to the house as our house within months of moving in, when her name wasn't on a single document. I let it go. I told myself, she's young, she's finding her place. Be patient, Margaret. Then Melissa's mother, Linda, started visiting. At first it was normal. A weekend here, a holiday there. I welcomed Linda too, because that is who I am. I cooked for her. I gave her the guest room. I made her feel like family, even though something about the way she looked around my house, evaluating everything, made me uneasy from the very first visit. Linda would open my closets under the excuse of helping organize, would comment on how big my bedroom was, how much space I had for just one person. I brushed it off as harmless curiosity. I remember one dinner in particular, maybe 6 weeks before everything came to a head, that I should have paid closer attention to at the time. Linda had been staying with us for nearly a month already by then, though it was still being called an extended visit. Instead of anything more permanent, we were all sitting around my dining table, the same table Harold and I bought at an estate sale back in 1988, and Linda started talking quite casually about how much she loved the house, how peaceful the neighborhood was, how she had always dreamed of a home with a proper garden like the one I kept in the backyard. Then she said, looking directly at me with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes, "You know, Margaret, it really is such a big house for just one person rattling around in it most of the day while everyone's at work. It seems almost a shame not to make full use of all this space." I remember laughing it off at the time, saying something about how I liked having room to spread out, how it kept me from feeling cooped up. Melissa had chimed in then, agreeing with her mother, saying that it did seem like a lot of house for one person, and Gregory had said nothing at all, just kept eating his dinner, which in hindsight should have told me something too, that he was already unwilling to defend the shape of my own home against his wife and her mother, even in casual conversation. Looking back now, I recognized that dinner conversation for exactly what it was, an early, gentle probing to see how I would react to the idea of giving up space in my own house, a test to see whether I would push back or simply absorb the comment and let it go. The way I had absorbed so many other small comments before it. I let it go that night, the way I let so many things go. And I have often wondered, in the week since everything happened, whether things might have turned out differently if I had pushed back. Right there at that dinner table instead of waiting until my own closet was already half emptied. But the visits got longer. A weekend became a week. A week became 2 weeks. And then, about 2 months ago, Linda simply stopped leaving. Nobody announced it. Nobody asked me if it was all right. She just stayed. Her suitcase turned into 3 suitcases. Her toiletries took over my bathroom counter. Her medications filled up half my kitchen cabinet. And still, I said nothing. Because I did not want to start a fight in my own home. In the home I built with my husband. Over something that felt, at the time, small enough to overlook. I should have said something. I know that now. But hindsight is a cruel teacher, and it only gives its lessons after the damage is already done. I want to back up for a moment, because I think it matters, and I think you will understand my whole story better if I tell you a little about who Harold and I were before any of this happened. Harold worked at the same auto parts warehouse for 34 years, and I taught second grade for 28 of those years. And together we saved every extra dollar we could to buy this house when Gregory was still in diapers. We did not have granite counters or a finished basement. We had a small ranch, style house on a quiet street, with a big maple tree in the backyard, and to us it was a palace, because it was ours, free and clear, bought with our own hands and paid off years before Harold got sick. Harold used to say that a house is not just walls and a roof. It is the record of a life. Every scuff on the hallway floor was from Gregory's toy trucks. Every uneven paint line in the garage was from the summer Harold decided he was going to paint the whole house himself and ran out of patience by the 3rd wall. Every crack in the kitchen tile was from the time I dropped a cast iron pan, trying to catch a phone call from my sister. On the wall-mounted telephone we had back then, that house held our whole life inside it. And when Harold passed away 6 years ago, sitting right there in his recliner, in the living room with the television on and a cup of coffee, going cold beside him, I made a promise to myself that I would keep that house standing exactly the way we built it, for as long as I possibly could, because it was the last living thing we had made together. So when I say that losing my bedroom felt like losing something sacred, I need you to understand it was not about vanity or about being particular about which room I slept in. It was about the fact that Harold and I picked out that exact wallpaper together in 1994. It was about the fact that our wedding photo hung on that exact wall for 30 years. It was about the fact that I could lie in that bed at night, on my side, and reach over and still feel like some small part of Harold was there beside me, even though he had been gone for 6 years. That room was not just a room. It was the last place on earth where Harold still felt close to me. 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, I went to my quarterly doctor's appointment in the morning, and then I stopped by my friend Carol's house for lunch, the way I do every few weeks. We talked for hours the way old friends do, about grandchildren and gardens and the price of everything these days. I did not get home until almost 6 in the evening, and when I pulled into my own driveway, something felt wrong immediately. There was a small moving truck parked on the street. Not a big one, just a rental van, the kind you get from the hardware store for a few hours. I walked into my house and I heard voices coming from upstairs. From my bedroom. My bedroom, the one Harold and I shared for over 2 decades, the one with the window that looks out over the maple tree, the one where I still slept on his side of the bed sometimes just to feel close to him. I walked up the stairs, and what I saw made my knees go weak. Melissa and Linda were in my room. My dresser drawers were open and empty. My clothes were folded into cardboard boxes stacked by the door. My photographs of Harold, the ones that sat on my nightstand for 6 years, were wrapped in newspaper and shoved into a box labeled Margaret stuff in Melissa's handwriting. And Linda? Linda was already hanging her own clothes in my closet. My closet. The one that still had Harold's old flannel shirt hanging in the back corner. Because I could never bring myself to give it away. I stood in the doorway and I said, "What is going on here?" Melissa turned around like I had interrupted something completely ordinary. She didn't even look guilty. She said, "Oh, Margaret, you're home. We were just moving some things around. Mom's going to be staying here permanently now, since her lease ended, and honestly, this room just makes more sense for her. It gets better light, and it's closer to the bathroom. You'll be much more comfortable in the smaller room down the hall." I could not speak for a moment. I looked at Linda, who at least had the decency to avoid my eyes, and then back at Melissa. I said, "This is my room, Melissa. This is my house. Nobody asked me if Linda could move in permanently, and nobody asked me if I would be giving up my bedroom." Melissa's face changed then. The politeness dropped away like a mask sliding off. She crossed her arms and said, "Margaret, be reasonable. You're one person. You don't need a whole master bedroom with an attached bathroom. My mother has arthritis. She needs the easier access. This isn't personal, it's just practical." I said, "It is absolutely personal. You went through my things without asking me. You packed up my husband's photographs like they were garbage. This is not practical. This is disrespectful." That is when I heard the front door open downstairs. The familiar creak of the hinge, Harold always meant to fix and never quite got around to, and Gregory's voice calling out, "I'm home. Whose van is that outside?" I felt a small flicker of hope. My son. Surely my son would understand. Surely my son would see how wrong this was and put a stop to it immediately. I walked to the top of the stairs and called down to him, "Gregory, come up here, please. I need to talk to you about something." He came up the stairs 2 at a time, still in his work clothes, and when he saw the scene in the bedroom, the boxes, his mother-in-law's clothes in my closet, he paused for just a second. Just 1 second where I thought, thank God he sees it too. But then Melissa spoke first before I could say a single word. She said, "Gregory, your mother is being difficult about the room situation. I already explained that Mom needs the master bedroom for her health, and Margaret is refusing to be flexible. And my son, my own son that I carried for 9 months, that I raised alone through so many hard years after Harold passed, my son looked at me and said, 'Mom, come on. Can't you just let this go? Melissa's mom has real medical needs. You're perfectly capable of using a smaller room. Why does this have to be such a big deal?' I felt something crack wide open inside my chest, right where hope had been sitting just a moment before. I said, 'Gregory, this is my house. Do you understand that? My name is on the deed. Not yours, not Melissa's, not Linda's. Mine. I have lived in this room for 31 years. I am not asking for anything unreasonable by wanting to keep my own bedroom in my own home." Gregory ran his hand through his hair, the way he does when he's stressed and wants an argument to be over. He said, "Mom, please don't make this into a whole thing. It's just a room. You're being selfish." Selfish? My own son called me selfish in my own home for objecting to being pushed out of my bedroom by a woman I had known for less than a year. I said, "Fine, if you all think it's so reasonable. Where exactly am I supposed to sleep tonight?" And this is the part I still cannot fully believe, even now, weeks later, Melissa said, without even a flicker of hesitation. "There's the screened porch. It's summer, it's warm enough. We can set up the folding cot out there for a few nights while we figure out a permanent room situation for you." I looked at my son, waiting, praying for him to object, for him to say absolutely not. My mother will not sleep on a porch like she's a stranger in her own house. But he didn't say that. He looked tired and annoyed, and he said, "It's just for a few nights. Mom, don't make this dramatic. It's not that cold out." He ordered me, his own mother, the woman who raised him, to sleep outside on a screened porch in the house I owned, so that his wife's mother could have my bedroom. I did not scream. I did not raise my voice or throw a single accusation across that room. Though every instinct in my body wanted to, I did not cry in front of them, though God knows I wanted to. I have never in my life felt so small, so disposable, in a place that was supposed to be the safest place on earth for me. I simply said, "All right," and I walked downstairs and I went to the porch, and I looked at the old folding cot that Gregory dragged out from the garage, the same cot we used for camping trips when he was a boy, and I sat down on it, and I stared out into the backyard at the maple tree where Buster is buried, and I thought about Harold, and I thought, what would you do if you were here to see this? That night, lying on that cot, listening to the crickets, and feeling the night air get cooler than Gregory promised it would, I did not sleep. I thought about 31 years. I thought about every diaper I changed, every school lunch I packed, every late night I stayed up when Gregory had a fever, every dollar Harold and I saved so we could pay off this house free and clear before he died, so that I would never have to worry about a roof over my head. And I thought about how, in a single afternoon, that roof had been taken from me by two women who had lived in this house for less time combined than I had lived here alone in just the last 6 years. Somewhere around midnight, my neighbor from next door, Mrs. Patterson, a widow around my own age who has lived beside me for almost 20 years, happened to step out onto her own back porch to let her cat in for the night. She saw me lying on that cot through the screen, wrapped in a thin blanket, and she called out quietly, so as not to wake the whole street, "Margaret? Margaret, is that you out there? What in the world are you doing sleeping outside?" I did not want to explain it to her. Not right then, with my pride already in shreds. But Mrs. Patterson has known me long enough to recognize when something is very wrong. She came over to the fence between our yards, still in her nightgown and slippers, and she looked at me with such concern in her face that I finally broke down and told her, in a whisper, what had happened. I told her about the boxes, about Linda's clothes in my closet, about Gregory telling me not to make it. Dramatic. Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened as she listened, and when I finished, she said something I have thought about many times since. She said, "Margaret Holloway, I have known you for 2 decades, and I have never once seen you make a scene about anything, even when you had every right to. If you are telling me you are sleeping on a cot tonight, then something in that house has gone very wrong, and you need to protect yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you." She offered to let me sleep on her own couch that very night, but I told her I would be all right until morning, more out of stubbornness and sheer exhaustion than any real confidence in that statement. Before she went back inside, she squeezed my hand over the fence and said, "You call me if you need anything, day or night, you hear me? And Margaret, don't you dare let anybody make you feel small in your own home. You raised a good boy once. Somewhere in there, he still is one. But good boys sometimes need reminding of who taught them right from wrong in the first place." I did not fall asleep until nearly 4 in the morning, and when I woke up, stiff and cold and with my back aching something terrible, I heard laughter coming from inside the house. Melissa and Linda were in the kitchen, my kitchen, drinking coffee and laughing about something, completely at ease, as if nothing at all unusual had happened the night before, as if it was perfectly normal for a 74-year-old woman to sleep outside so a stranger could have her bedroom. I did not go inside right away. I sat on that cot a little longer, and something shifted in me. The hurt didn't go away, but underneath the hurt, something else started to grow. A clarity, a cold, quiet resolve. I thought about every single thing Harold ever taught me about handling people who try to take advantage of your kindness. He used to say, "Margaret, being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. Kindness has a spine. And in that moment, sitting on that cot with my back aching and my heart broken, I decided I was going to find my spine again. I went inside eventually, and I made myself a cup of tea quietly, while Melissa and Linda continued chatting like I was invisible. I did not say a word to either of them. Instead, I took my tea out to the front steps, sat down and called my dearest friend Carol, the same friend I had eaten lunch with the very afternoon this whole nightmare began. Carol answered on the second ring, cheerful as always, but her tone changed the moment she heard my voice. She said, "Margaret, honey, what's wrong? You sound like you've been crying." I told her everything, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to, and when I got to the part about sleeping on the porch cot, Carol went completely silent for a moment, and then she said, in a voice I had never heard from her before, low and fierce, "Margaret Holloway, you listen to me right now. You are not some house guest who overstayed her welcome. That is your house. Harold's house. Your name is on that deed, and I happen to know for a fact that you never signed a single piece of paper giving anybody else a claim to it, because you told me yourself just last year when you updated your will. Whatever guilt you are feeling right now about making waves, I need you to set it aside, because the only person who should feel guilty in this situation is not you." I told her I did not know what to do, that some small part of me still wanted to just apologize, smooth things over, sleep on the cot a few more nights if it kept the peace. Carol's response has stayed with me every single day since. She said, "Margaret, I have known you for 42 years. I watched you go back to work 3 weeks after you lost your first baby because you didn't want to burden anyone with your grief. I watched you nurse Harold through his last illness without a single complaint. Even when your own back gave out from lifting him, you have spent your whole life keeping the peace for other people. Just once keep the peace for yourself. Call Diane. Let her help you. You have earned the right to be protected too." I hung up the phone that afternoon and sat on my own front steps for a long while, turning Carol's words over in my mind, and something about hearing them from someone who had known me for over 4 decades, someone with no stake in this except my own well-being, gave me a kind of permission I had not been able to give myself. I went to my purse and I took out my cell phone and I called my daughter, Diane. Diane lives 2 hours away in the next county over. She is my younger child, 5 years behind Gregory, and she has always been the more direct one of the two, the one who tells you exactly what she thinks whether you want to hear it or not. When I told her what happened, when I described the boxes, the porch, the cot, Gregory's face when he told me not to make it dramatic, there was a long silence on the phone. And then Diane said something I will never forget. She said, "Mom, pack a bag. I'm coming to get you right now. And then we are going to figure out exactly how to fix this. Because what they did to you is not just rude, it is elder abuse. And I will not let my brother's wife treat you like garbage in your own home." I told her I didn't want to make a scene, that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe Gregory was just stressed and would come around. Diane cut me off. She said, "Mom, you slept on a porch, caught last night while a woman who has known you for 8 months sleeps in your bed. There is no version of this where you are overreacting. Pack a bag." 2 hours later, Diane pulled into the driveway. She walked into the house without knocking, because it is still my house, and she found Melissa in the kitchen. I watched my daughter, all 5'4" of her, stand in front of Melissa and say, "Where is my mother's furniture from her bedroom?" Melissa, caught off guard, stammered something about it being in storage in the garage. Diane didn't raise her voice, but her tone could have cut glass. She said, "You put a 74-year-old woman on an outdoor cot last night. Do you understand what that could have done to her health? Do you understand that if something had happened to her out there, you and Gregory would be looking at a very serious legal situation?" Melissa tried to defend herself, saying it was temporary, that they were going to sort out a proper room for me. Diane looked at her and said, "There already was a proper room for her. It was the master bedroom she has slept in for 31 years. You took it, and then you had my brother order her outside, like she was a dog that got underfoot. I packed a bag while Diane and Melissa talked. I did not take much. Some clothes, my medications, my late husband's watch, and the box of photographs that Melissa had already packed up for me, ironically making my departure easier than it should have been. Gregory came home while I was packing, and when he saw Diane's car in the driveway and me carrying a suitcase down the stairs, his face went pale. He said, "Mom, what are you doing? Where are you going?" I looked at my son, and for the first time in that entire ordeal, I let him see exactly how much he had hurt me. I said, "I am going to stay with your sister for a while, Gregory, because in this house right now there is no room for me. Apparently there is a screened porch, but I am too old and too tired to sleep on a cot in my own backyard." He tried to backpedal. He said things were getting blown out of proportion, that it was only supposed to be a couple of nights, that I could have the smaller bedroom starting tomorrow, that he never meant for me to actually be uncomfortable. But it was too late for apologies. Born out of panic, instead of genuine understanding. I told him calmly, "Gregory, you looked at your mother, and you chose your mother-in-law's comfort over mine, in a house that I own. I need some time away from this house to think clearly. I will be at Diane's." And then I left. I walked out of my own home, the home Harold and I built our whole life inside of, with a suitcase and my dignity, because those two things were the only things left in that house that still fully belonged to me. The drive to Diane's house was quiet. I stared out the window and watched the familiar roads turn into unfamiliar ones, and somewhere around the halfway point, I finally let myself cry. Not loud sobbing, just quiet tears that had been building for weeks, maybe months, ever since Linda's suitcases started multiplying in my guest room. Diane didn't say anything. She just reached over and held my hand at every red light along the way she used to, when she was a little girl and scared of thunderstorms rattling the windows at night. That first night at Diane's house, I slept in her guest room, in an actual bed, under an actual roof that didn't have someone else's plans hanging over it. And I slept for nearly 10 hours straight. When I woke up, Diane had already made coffee, and she sat across from me at her kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. And she said, "Mom, I want you to tell me everything, from the very beginning, and I want you to be completely honest with me, because we are going to need to make some decisions." So I told her everything. About Linda's visit stretching longer and longer. About the comments regarding my bedroom's size. About the way Melissa had started referring to the house as ours. About small things I had let slide because I didn't want to be the difficult mother-in-law, the interfering old woman who couldn't let her son build his own life. Diane listened to all of it without interrupting, taking notes the entire time, and when I finished, she set down her pen and said, "Mom, I think it's time we talk to a lawyer." I resisted at first. The idea of lawyers, of formal documents, of making this into something legal and official felt so extreme. This was my family, after all, even if they had hurt me terribly. But Diane explained something to me that changed my mind completely. She said, "Mom, you are the sole legal owner of that house. Gregory and Melissa live there because of your kindness, not because of any right. And what worries me is not just what happened last night. It's what happens next if you don't set clear boundaries now. People who will pack up your bedroom and put you on a porch cot without blinking are people who might try to take even more from you down the road, especially if they think you're too soft to fight back." She was right, and deep down, I think I already knew it. This was not just about a bedroom. This was about a pattern, a slow and steady erosion of my place in my own life, dressed up in excuses about practicality and Linda's arthritis. If I did not draw a line now, where exactly would the line ever get drawn? 2 days later, Diane took me to see her lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Ruiz, who had helped Diane with her own divorce years earlier. I explained the situation to Patricia, and she asked me a series of questions. Was the house solely in my name? Yes. Was there any written agreement giving Gregory, Melissa, or Linda any legal right to reside there? No. Had I ever signed anything transferring ownership? Adding names to the deed or granting power of attorney? No, thank God I hadn't. Though Patricia mentioned that many elderly homeowners in similar situations get pressured into exactly that kind of document, sometimes without fully understanding what they're signing. Patricia also asked me a question that I was not expecting, and it turned out to be one of the most important questions of the entire process. She asked, "Margaret, in the past year, has anyone in the household ever suggested that you might be forgetful, or confused, or not quite yourself, even in small joking ways?" I sat there for a moment and then it hit me, a slow, sick realization rolling over me like a wave. Yes, actually, yes, there had been comments. Small ones, Melissa mentioning in front of guests that I had gotten a little forgetful lately, when in truth, I had simply misplaced my reading glasses twice in 1 month, the way anyone might. Linda commenting once, within earshot of me, to a neighbor, that she worried about Margaret managing everything on her own at her age. At the time I had brushed these comments off as harmless, even slightly annoying. But sitting in Patricia's office, hearing her explain that this kind of language is sometimes used deliberately to lay groundwork, to make family members or outsiders doubt an elderly person's competence ahead of a larger financial move, I felt genuinely frightened for the first time in this whole ordeal. Not angry, frightened. Because if that pattern was real, then what happened with my bedroom might have been only the beginning of something much bigger. Patricia advised me gently but firmly to keep a written record from that point forward of any comments like that, along with dates, and to consider having my own physician document formally that my memory and cognition were completely sound, simply as a protective measure. I did exactly that. I called my doctor, Dr. Ferris, the very next week and asked for a full cognitive evaluation, not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted an unshakable, official record in case anyone ever tried to use those small comments against me down the road. I passed with flying colors, of course, and I kept that letter in a safe deposit box at my bank, right alongside my will and Harold's old life insurance documents, just in case. That comment stuck with me. I thought back over the last several months, and I remembered with a chill running down my spine a conversation from about 6 weeks earlier. Melissa had brought up very casually over dinner that it might be smart for me to simplify things by adding Gregory's name to the house deed, just in case anything happens to you, so there's no complicated inheritance process. At the time, I had brushed it off, telling her I would think about it, that there was no rush. Now sitting in Patricia's office, that casual dinner conversation felt less like helpful advice and more like the opening move of something much larger. Patricia explained my options clearly. Since the house was entirely mine, I had every legal right to determine who lived there and under what conditions. If I wanted, I could ask Gregory, Melissa, and Linda to leave entirely. I could set a deadline. I could involve the police if they refused to leave after a formal notice. Though Patricia said that in situations like this, a firm, well-documented conversation was often enough, especially once people realized the homeowner was serious and had legal backing. I sat with that information for a long moment. Part of me, the mother part of me, the part that still remembered, Gregory as a small boy running into my arms after scraped knees, did not want to throw my own son out of his home. But another part of me, the part that had spent a sleepless night on a cold porch cot while listening to laughter from my own kitchen, knew that something had to change, decisively and permanently, or I would spend the rest of my life being slowly pushed further and further out of the life I built. I decided on a plan. Not eviction, not immediately, not for Gregory. But for Linda, absolutely. Linda had no legal right to be in my house at all. Had never asked my permission for an extended stay, let alone a permanent one, and had participated eagerly in packing up my bedroom without a single word of protest or discomfort. Linda would go. As for Gregory and Melissa, I decided to give them a choice, a real choice, laid out clearly and without room for manipulation. Patricia drew up a formal letter, and I want to tell you, seeing my situation written out in plain legal language made everything feel very real, very serious, in a way that our shouting matches in the kitchen never had. The letter stated that I was the sole owner of the property, that Linda's occupancy had never been authorized and was to end within 7 days, and that Gregory and Melissa's continued. Residence was conditional, on my bedroom being restored to me immediately, and on a written agreement regarding household conduct going forward, an agreement that would include real consequences if violated again. In the days leading up to that return, Patricia advised me to take one more precaution, one I had not even considered on my own. She suggested I have the locks changed on the house, not to lock anyone out permanently before we had even talked, but so that no one could enter or remove anything from the property while I was away finalizing my plans, and so that I would have full control over who held keys going forward. I called a locksmith the very next morning, a kind older gentleman named Mr. Alvarez, who had actually rekeyed our locks once before, years ago after Harold lost his keychain on a fishing trip. When I explained briefly what was happening, Mr. Alvarez shook his head and said, "Ma'am, I've rekeyed a lot of houses in this town over the years for a lot of reasons, and this is one of the good ones. You take care of yourself." He gave me 3 new keys, and I kept 2, giving the third to Diane for safekeeping, in case anything should happen to me and someone needed emergency access. I will admit, standing in my own driveway that morning, watching a stranger change the locks on the house I had lived in for 31 years, felt surreal in a way I cannot fully describe. Part of me felt like a criminal, locking out my own son even temporarily, even with the intention of inviting him back in under fair terms. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger every day since that night on the cot, understood that protecting my home was not an act of cruelty toward my family. It was an act of self-respect, long overdue. A week after I left, I went back to the house. Diane came with me, and so did Patricia, who advised that having a witness present, someone unrelated to the immediate family drama, was wise. I remember standing on my own front porch, ringing my own doorbell, because I did not yet know if I still had a key that would be honored, and feeling my heart pound harder than it had in years. Gregory opened the door, and his face was a mixture of relief and dread when he saw me. He said, "Mom, thank God. Come in, we've been so worried about you." I stepped inside, and the house looked different somehow, though nothing had physically changed except my absence for a week. Melissa came out from the living room, and behind her, I saw Linda hovering near the staircase, looking considerably less comfortable than she had a week earlier. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I simply said, "I am here to discuss the terms under which I am willing to allow anyone to continue living in my house." I watched Melissa's expression shift from relief to something more guarded when she heard the word allow. She was not used to hearing that word applied to herself in this house. Patricia stepped forward and calmly explained the situation. She explained that the house was solely titled to me, that I had every legal right to determine occupancy, and that the letter she was providing outlined the conditions under which residency would continue. I watched Gregory's face as Patricia spoke. Watched the reality settle over him, the reality that his mother was not bluffing, that this was not a temporary mood that would blow over if he waited long enough, apologized a little, and brought home her favorite flowers. Linda spoke up first, her voice sharp and defensive. She said, "I don't understand why this has to be so formal. We're all family here." And I looked at her, really looked at her, and I said, "Linda, we are not family. My daughter-in-law is family. My son is family. My grandchildren are family. You are the mother of my daughter-in-law, and I welcomed you as a guest, out of kindness, for what was supposed to be a short visit. That kindness was repaid by you, moving your entire life into my house without ever once asking my permission, and by helping to move me out of my own bedroom onto an outdoor cot. So, no, Linda, this is not family. This is a homeowner addressing an unauthorized occupant, and you have 7 days to make arrangements to leave." The room went completely silent. I do not think anyone, including myself if I am being honest, expected me to speak with that much clarity and force. Melissa opened her mouth to object, but I held up my hand, and something in my expression must have stopped her, because she closed it again. I turned to Gregory next. I said, "Gregory, you are my son and I love you, and nothing about this changes that love. But I need you to understand something clearly. What happened 3 weeks ago was not a small disagreement about room arrangements. You watched your mother, a woman in her 70s, packed out of her own bedroom without her consent, and instead of standing up for me, you told me not to be dramatic and sent me outside to sleep on a cot. That is something I will need time to fully heal from, and I need you to understand how deeply that decision hurt me." Gregory's eyes filled with tears, real tears, and for the first time since this entire ordeal began, I saw genuine remorse on his face instead of defensive irritation. He said, "Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't even know how to explain how sorry I am. I was so stressed about keeping the peace at home, about Melissa and her mom, that I stopped thinking clearly about what was actually happening. I looked at you, at my own mother, and I treated you like the problem instead of protecting you like I should have. I will never forgive myself for that." I stood there for a long moment looking at her face, searching for the sincerity I so badly wanted to find. And though a part of me remained cautious, another part of me, the part that still believed in second chances even after everything, wanted to give her room to prove those words true. I did not immediately soften, though hearing those words did ease something tight in my chest. I said, "Gregory, I appreciate hearing that, truly I do. But an apology does not undo 3 weeks of hurt, and it does not undo 31 years of history being treated like an inconvenience. If you want to remain in this house with me, there are going to be conditions. My bedroom will be restored to me today completely, with all of my belongings returned exactly as they were. There will be a written agreement about how decisions in this household are made going forward, agreed to by everyone living here. And Linda will be gone within the week." Melissa, who had been quiet for most of this, finally spoke. Her voice had lost its earlier sharpness. She said, "Margaret, I think I owe you an apology too. I got so caught up in wanting my mom to be comfortable, and honestly in wanting more control over the house, that I stopped seeing you as a person with feelings and history here. I saw you as an obstacle. That was wrong, and I'm ashamed of how I treated you." I looked at her for a long moment. I wanted to believe her. I truly did, but 3 weeks of hurt does not simply dissolve because of a well-timed apology delivered in front of a lawyer. I said, "Melissa, I hear you, and I hope that apology is sincere. But trust is rebuilt through actions over time, not through words in a single conversation. I am willing to give this family a chance to rebuild, but I need to see consistent respect, not just contrition when consequences are on the table." Word of what had happened spread through the wider family faster than I expected, mostly because Diane, in her fierce and protective way, had called her aunt, my sister-in-law Judith, Harold's younger sister, to ask if she had any advice, since Judith herself had gone through a similar situation years earlier with her own in-laws. Judith, it turned out, did not keep the story to herself. By the time our family's monthly Sunday dinner rolled around, nearly everyone already knew some version of what had happened, and I want to tell you, walking into my sister-in-law's dining room that Sunday, not knowing exactly what everyone had heard or how they would look at me, was one of the more nerve-wracking moments of this entire ordeal. My brother-in-law, Frank, Harold's older brother, a quiet man who rarely says much at family gatherings, stood up the moment I walked in, pulled out a chair for me himself, and said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Margaret, you sit right here next to me today." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything because it told me, without a single word about the situation itself, that he knew and that he was on my side. Over dinner, my niece Kayla, Judith's daughter, who is close in age to Melissa, asked me gently if I wanted to talk about what had happened, and for the first time since the whole ordeal began, I told the story out loud in full to a table full of family who loved me. I watched their faces as I described the boxes. The caught Gregory's words about being dramatic, and I watched real anger rise up in people who had known Gregory since he was a baby, people who remembered him as a sweet, gentle child and could not reconcile that memory with the man who had ordered his own mother outside. Judith reached over and took my hand at one point and said, "Margaret, I want you to know something. Harold would be furious right now. Absolutely furious if he knew what was happening in that house. But he would also be so proud of you for standing up for yourself instead of just enduring it the way so many women our age were taught to do. You are doing exactly the right thing," Frank added, gruffly but with real feeling. That boy needs to remember whose name is on that house and whose sacrifices paid for it. You tell him that from me if you need to. That dinner did something important for me. It reminded me that I was not alone, that I had an entire extended family who loved me and would stand behind me, and it gave me the strength I needed for what was coming next. The return to the house, the formal letter, the conversation with Linda and Melissa, and my own son that would determine the shape of the rest of my life in that home. Linda left 5 days later. I did not gloat, and I did not make her departure ugly or humiliating, though God knows there was a part of me that wanted to. I simply helped Melissa carry a few of Linda's boxes to her car, and I told Linda, honestly and without malice, "I hope you find a good place to live. Linda, I truly do, but this was never going to be your home, and I needed you to understand that clearly." Linda did not apologize. Not really, though she did say quietly, before she drove away, that she hadn't thought about how it must have looked from my side. It wasn't much, but it was something. The weeks that followed were not easy. Rebuilding trust with Gregory and Melissa took real work. Real conversations, some of them difficult and uncomfortable. We sat down together, the three of us, and wrote out an actual agreement in writing about how decisions in the house would be made going forward. Nothing regarding shared spaces, guests, or arrangements would happen without discussing it with me first. My bedroom, my space, my belongings were mine, fully and without question, for as long as I chose to live in that house. We also began having a standing Sunday dinner again. Just the 5 of us, Gregory, Melissa, myself, and the 2 children, something we had let slip away entirely during the months when Linda's presence had crowded out so much of our old routines. The first few of those dinners were quiet, a little formal even, everyone still finding their footing with each other again, but by the 3rd or 4th Sunday, something in the atmosphere had loosened. And I remember one evening in particular when Melissa asked me, unprompted, to teach her how to make Harold's favorite pot roast, the one I had made every Sunday of our marriage for over 3 decades. We stood together in the kitchen for 2 hours that afternoon, me guiding her hands as she browned the meat, telling her stories about Harold as we worked, about the early years of our marriage, about the day we brought Gregory home from the hospital, about the small ordinary joys that had filled that house for so many years before any of this trouble began. Melissa cried a little that afternoon, not from sadness exactly, but from something closer to gratitude. And she told me that she realized, standing in that kitchen with flour on her hands, how much history she had almost thrown away in her rush to make the house feel like her own. She said, "Margaret, I think I was so focused on building Something new that I forgot the house already had something beautiful in it. Something I could have been learning from instead of trying to replace. I told her that it was not too late to learn, that history does not disappear just because you nearly walked past it, and that I was glad, genuinely glad, to have the chance to share those memories with her now. Gregory started doing something he had not done in years. He started checking in on me, genuinely, asking how I was feeling, remembering that Tuesdays were my standing lunch with Carol, and making sure he never scheduled anything that would interfere. He started fixing the things around the house that Harold used to take care of. The leaky faucet in the downstairs bathroom, the loose porch step, small things, but things that told me he was paying attention again, seeing me again, not just as an obstacle to his own comfort, but as his mother, a person with needs and history and dignity. Melissa, to her credit, also changed. It was slower with her, understandably, since our relationship had never been as deep as the one I share with my own son. But she started asking me for advice on things. Small things at first, a recipe, a plant that wasn't thriving in the backyard, and over time those conversations grew warmer, more genuine. About 6 weeks after everything happened, she came to me privately and told me that having her mother in the house had been more complicated than she let on, that Linda had actually been going through a difficult time, financially and emotionally, after her own divorce, and that Melissa had let her guilt and worry about her mother cloud her judgment about what was fair to ask of me. It didn't excuse what happened, but it helped me understand it. And understanding, I have found, makes forgiveness a little more possible. I want to tell you something important here. Something I have thought about a great deal in the weeks since all of this happened. I could have stayed angry. I could have sold the house out from under all of them, moved in with Diane permanently, and cut Gregory out of my life the way he nearly cut me out of my own bedroom. There were nights, especially that first week at Diane's house, when I genuinely considered it. But anger, even justified anger, is a heavy thing to carry for the rest of your life. And I did not want to spend whatever years I have left carrying that weight, instead of carrying love for my son and my grandchildren. So I chose something harder than revenge. I chose accountability first, and forgiveness second, in that exact order, because forgiveness without accountability is just permission to be hurt again. I made sure Gregory and Melissa understood exactly what they had done wrong. I made sure there were real consequences and real changes. And only after all of that did I open my heart back up to trusting them again. There is one more thing I have to tell you because I think it matters. About 2 weeks after Linda moved out, Gregory sat me down at the kitchen table, the very table where I found my bank statement confusing years ago when Harold first taught me to balance our checkbook, and he told me something that broke my heart all over again, though in a different way. He said that in the months leading up to everything, he and Melissa had been quietly stressed about money, more than I realized, and that somewhere in the middle of that stress, Melissa had floated the idea more than once of eventually asking me to sign the house over to them, framing it as estate planning, as making things easier for everyone later on. Gregory told me he had pushed back on it every time, but he admitted that watching Linda move in so comfortably, so permanently without anyone stopping her, had made him realize how close they had all come to normalizing exactly that kind of overreach, one small step at a time, until a bedroom becomes a whole house. Hearing that confirmed something I already suspected deep down, and it made me even more grateful that I had listened to Diane, that I had gone to see Patricia when I did, and that I had never signed anything without thinking it through carefully first. I told Gregory that his honesty, painful as it was to hear, meant more to me than any apology alone could have, because it showed me he finally understood the real stakes of what almost happened, not just to my bedroom, but to my entire home and my independence. About 2 months after everything settled, we had Ethan's 8th birthday party in the backyard, right under the maple tree where Buster is buried, and it was the first time the whole family had gathered together at the house since. Linda moved out. I baked the cake myself, a yellow cake with chocolate frosting, the same recipe I had made for Gregory's birthdays when he was a boy. And as I stood at the kitchen counter frosting it, Melissa came in and stood beside me, quiet for a moment, before she asked if she could help. We frosted that cake together, side by side, not saying much, but it was the first time since everything happened that being in the kitchen with her felt easy instead of strained. During the party, I watched Gregory chase Ethan around the yard, both of them laughing, and I watched Melissa help baby Sophie take wobbly steps across the grass. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like the family I had always hoped they would become, back when Gregory first brought Melissa home to meet me all those years ago. Frank and Judith came too, and Diane drove the 2 hours with her own family, and even Carol stopped by for an hour with a gift for Ethan, a little toolbox because he had recently declared he wanted to be an inventor when he grew up. At one point during the party, Gregory found me sitting alone on the porch, in the very spot where the folding cot had once stood, watching everyone laugh and play in the yard, and he sat down beside me without saying anything at first. Then he said quietly, "Mom, I think about that night a lot, more than I probably let on." I told him I appreciated him saying that, and he continued, his voice a little rough. "I keep thinking about how many times you must have put us first, Diane and me, without ever once making us feel like a burden. And then the one time you needed us to put you first, even just for a single night, I failed you. I don't ever want to be the kind of man who does that to the people he loves again." I reached over and took his hand, the way I used to when he was small and scared of the dark. And I told him that the fact he could sit here and say that to me, honestly and without excuses, told me more about the man he was becoming than that one terrible night ever could. We sat together on that porch for a long while, watching his children play in the yard his father and I had built a whole life around, and something between us, something that had been cracked and strained for weeks, finally began to feel whole again. My grandchildren, little Ethan and baby Sophie, do not know the full details of everything that happened. They are too young to carry that kind of weight. But I will tell you this, Ethan, who is 7, came to me about a month after everything settled down, and he climbed up onto my lap the way he used to when he was smaller. And he said, "Grandma, I'm glad you're home. The house feels right again when you're here, out of the mouths of babes." As they say, even a 7-year-old could feel what was missing when I was gone, even if he couldn't have explained why. I think often about that first night on the cot, about how cold and small and forgotten I felt staring up at the screened porch ceiling, listening to crickets and feeling every one of my 74 years in my aching back. I think about how easy it would have been to simply endure it, to tell myself the next morning that it was just one night, that Gregory was right, that I shouldn't make it dramatic, and to let that single humiliation become the first of many, each one a little easier to accept than the last, until I woke up one day a stranger in my own life, sleeping wherever I was told, grateful for whatever scraps of space and consideration were left over for me. I think about how many women my age have taken exactly that path, not because they lacked courage, but because no one ever told them they were allowed to expect better, even from the people they loved most. I did not take that path, and I am prouder of that decision than almost anything else I have done in the last decade of my life. Not because I punished my son or humiliated Linda, or won some kind of contest of wills within my own family. I am proud because I chose, in the quiet hours of that cold night, to remember that I still mattered, that 31 years of sacrifice and love had earned me the right to a bedroom and a voice and a home that respected my presence in it. That decision rippled outward into everything that followed, into the phone call with Carol, into Diane driving 2 hours to rescue me, into the lawyer's office, into the letter, into Linda's departure, into Gregory's tears on the porch steps, into Melissa's hands covered in flour learning to make pot roast in my kitchen. All of it started with one simple, Quiet decision not to let that single humiliating night become the rest of my story. Today I am back in my bedroom, the one with the window overlooking the maple tree where Buster is buried, the one where Harold's old flannel shirt still hangs in the back of the closet. My photographs are back on my nightstand, unwrapped from that newspaper, right where they belong. Linda is gone, living in her own apartment across town. And while our relationship remains distant and a little awkward when we cross paths at family gatherings, there is no more hostility between us, just the quiet understanding of two people who learned a hard lesson about boundaries the difficult way. Gregory and I are closer now than we have been in years. Closer maybe than we were even before Melissa moved in, because that entire ordeal forced conversations between us that we probably should have had a long time ago. Conversations about respect, about what it means to honor your parents not just in words but in actions, about the difference between keeping the peace and sacrificing someone else's dignity to do it. Melissa and I are still building something new, something more honest than what we had before. And I believe genuinely that we will get there, one honest conversation at a time. Just last week, she asked if I would help her plan Ethan's next birthday party. And when I said yes, she hugged me tightly, the way a daughter hugs a mother, and whispered that she was grateful I had given her the chance to become that kind of daughter to me after everything that happened. I held on to that hug a little longer than I might have a few months ago, because it reminded me that people are capable of real change, real growth, when they are given honest accountability, alongside a genuine chance to make things right. Sometimes in the evenings now, I sit in my bedroom with the window open, listening to the wind move through the branches of that old maple tree, and I think about how strange it is that a single afternoon, one Tuesday when I stayed a little too long at lunch with Carol, could have unraveled 31 years of quiet, settled life so completely, and how another few weeks of hard, uncomfortable, necessary honesty could stitch it all back together into something even stronger than before. Harold used to say that a marriage, and I think a family too, is not measured by how smoothly things go when everyone is comfortable, but by how honestly people treat each other when things get hard. By that measure, I believe my family has grown more, not less. Because of everything we went through together this summer, I share this story with you not to make you angry at my son, or at Melissa, or even at Linda, though I understand if parts of this made your blood boil the way it made mine boil that night on the porch cot. I share it because I know I am not the only grandmother out there who has been made to feel small, disposable, or like a burden in a home she built with her own two hands and her own sacrifices. If you are watching this and something in your own life resembles what happened to me, I want you to hear this clearly. Your home is your home. Your dignity is not negotiable no matter how old you get, no matter how much younger and louder the people around you might be. Kindness is a virtue, but kindness without boundaries becomes an invitation for people to take more and more, until one day you find yourself sleeping on a cot in your own backyard, wondering how you got there. I think, too, about the countless conversations I have had with women my own age over the years, in the grocery store, at church, at the beauty parlor on Fridays, women who have quietly confided in me about similar situations in their own families. A daughter-in-law who slowly took over decision-making in a household that was never hers to begin with. A son who stopped visiting because his wife decided his mother was too much work to keep around. A widow pressured, gently at first and then not so gently, into signing over a car, a savings account, a piece of property, all under the guise of simplifying things for everyone else's convenience. These stories are far more common than any of us like to admit. And I think one reason they happen so often is that so many of us were raised to believe that keeping the peace is the highest virtue a woman can hold, higher even than protecting herself. I do not believe that anymore, and I hope that if you take nothing else away from my story tonight, you will take that one lesson with you. Keeping the peace at the cost of your own dignity is not virtue. It is erosion, and it happens so slowly, one small compromise at a time, that you often do not notice how much of yourself you have given away until you find yourself sitting on a cot in your own backyard, wondering how on earth you got there. I let Linda's visits stretch longer than they should have because I did not want to seem unwelcoming. I let comments about my bedroom size go unanswered because I did not want to seem petty. I let my daughter-in-law refer to my house as our house because I did not want to seem controlling. Each of those small silences felt reasonable in the moment, even kind, and yet together they built a foundation for the very night that broke my heart. Find your spine the way I found mine. Ask for help when you need it. The way I called Diane. Talk to a lawyer if you need to protect what is legally yours. Because being family does not erase legal rights, and it should not erase basic respect either. And when the people who hurt you are truly, genuinely sorry, and when they show that sorrow through real, consistent change over time, allow yourself the grace of forgiveness, not because they deserve it automatically, but because you deserve the peace that comes from not carrying bitterness for the rest of your life. I still see Linda from time to time at graduations, at holiday gatherings when Melissa invites her, and while we will likely never be close, we are civil, even warm in small moments. Last month, at Sophie's first birthday party, Linda approached me by the punch bowl and told me quietly that she had thought a great deal about that summer, and that she understood now, more than she had let herself understand at the time, how deeply she had overstepped. She did not make excuses. She simply said, "I'm sorry. Margaret, truly." I told her I appreciated hearing that, and I meant it, because holding on to old resentment would have cost me more than it would have ever cost her. I am 74 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I slept outside my own home while people I trusted laughed inside without me. Today I am sleeping in my own bed again, in the room that was always mine, surrounded by a family that finally truly sees me. That is the story of what happened, exactly as it happened, and I hope it reaches whoever needs to hear it tonight, wherever you are, whatever your own story with your own family looks like right now. Now, before you go, I want to ask you again, because I really do love hearing from all of you. Where are you watching from? Comment your city down below. I promise I read every single one. And if you love your grandma, if this story touched you even a little bit, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to find your spine. Set your boundaries and reclaim the respect you deserve in your own home. Thank you for listening to my story, for sitting with me through all of it, the hurt and the anger and the slow, hard work of rebuilding, and I hope you carry a little piece of it with you tonight. Whatever your own home looks like right now, thank you for listening to my story, and I will see you in the next one.